Vandaag bij Antwoorden met Bayless Conley.
Jesus is the light of the world. Jesus is a healer. Jesus is a forgiver by nature, and we can expect Him to do those things all of the time.
Welkom bij Antwoorden met Bayless Conley. Het leven kan soms een uitdaging zijn. Maar of het nu gaat om financiën, relaties, gezondheid of de vraag naar je doel in je leven, één ding is zeker. God ziet je. Hij houdt van je. En wat er ook aan de hand is, Hij heeft de antwoorden op je vragen.
I want to talk to you about something that I found intriguing. John is the only one that records certain statements by Jesus in his gospel. You don't find him in the other three synoptic gospels, but in John, he records 7 I am statements of Jesus. 7 different times Jesus said, I am this, or I am that. And in so doing, it reveals his character, his nature, his mission, and his heart. We're going to begin by looking at a couple of them. The first one is in John chapter 8, and in verse 12. It says, Then Jesus spoke to them again, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. I am the light of the world. And again, the very next chapter, John 9 and verse 5, he says, As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. My friend, the Lamb of God that illuminates that celestial city in the world above also is the light of this world below. When Jesus moved into Capernaum, according to Matthew, a scripture in Isaiah, a prophecy of Isaiah was fulfilled. And Matthew records it as he says this about Jesus coming into the region of Capernaum. It says in Matthew 4 and 16, The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. And upon those who sat in the region and shadow of death, light has dawned. When Jesus came preaching and healing and working miracles, it brought a great light into their darkness, and it showed them what God was like. It brought illumination to what God was like. And the scripture declares in Hebrews 1 and 3, the Son, that is Jesus. The Son is the dazzling radiance of God's splendor, the exact expression of God's true nature, His mirror image. To see Jesus is to see the Father. To listen to Jesus, to watch Jesus, is a revelation of the Father's nature, of His character, and of His agenda. And there's 2 things that Jesus came to illuminate concerning God's agenda in connection with declaring Himself as the light of the world. And those 2 things are forgiveness and healing. For in John chapter 8, when Jesus declared, I am the light of the world, it was in connection with a woman caught in the act of adultery and the forgiveness that Jesus extended to her. And then in John chapter 9, when Jesus again declared, I'm the light of the world, it was in connection with the healing of a man born blind. He wanted to bring illumination to those 2 things. He wants our hearts flooded with light concerning these 2 things that He does by nature. He said, I am the light of the world. And friend, when the Lord says, I am something, it's His nature. In other words, He is that all the time. It doesn't cease to happen with the closing of a dispensation. Jesus is the light of the world. Jesus is a healer. Jesus is a forgiver by nature, and we can expect Him to do those things all of the time. Even as the psalmist of old said, Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all His benefits, who heals all your diseases, who forgives all your iniquities. He's a healer, He is a forgiver, and He does not change. Now again with that prophecy that Matthew quoted about the people sitting in darkness and in the region of the shadow of death, it also speaks of mankind's state away from God. that man is separated from God, spiritually in the darkness, cut off from God. Ephesians 5 and 8 says this, "For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord." And you know, the Apostle Paul, as he recounts his salvation experience and the commission that the Lord Jesus gave him, he said, Jesus told him, "I'm delivering you from the Jews and the Gentiles, to whom I'm now sending you back to them." And this is what he said, Jesus said to him in Acts 26:18, "I'm sending you to them to open their eyes in order to turn them from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and an inheritance among those who are sanctified by faith in me." To turn them from darkness to light. When I was, I think about 16, a friend of mine and I had someone drop us off back in the San Gabriel Mountains, and we had our little backpacks and our fishing poles, and we hiked in quite a few miles, made our little campsite by the river. We were going to fish all day, spend the night, cook the fish we caught, fish all day the next day, and then we'd agreed to hike out at a certain time, and they were going to pick us up. So he and I, we're fly fishing, and we caught quite a few trout, and we decided to do a little exploring. So we left our fishing rods there at our little camp, and we started climbing around back in the hills, and lo and behold, we found an abandoned mine. Now, I estimate it was probably 100 years old, been abandoned for at least 70 or 80 years. And being two 16-year-old boys, I mean, that is a rare find. Now, we didn't happen to have a flashlight, and anybody that as old as I am, you know flashlights 50 years ago hardly illuminated anything anyways. But I did in my fishing vest have a little box of wooden matches. So I said, "Come on." And we walked back into that cave. First thing we noticed is it's slippery and wet. Back until we turned a bend and you could no longer see the light from the entrance. So I started lighting matches, okay? And it burned down, it burned my fingers, and light another one, and we walked way, way back in there. And then my friend said, "I don't want to go any further." I said, "Okay, wait here." He was not happy. In the dark, I said, "Yeah, I'll be back." But I had to go see what was in there. So I'm lighting matches, and I walked way, way, way back in this cave and lit this match and realized I was a couple of feet away from a shaft that went straight down. And I remember I lit this match and I dropped it, and it just went down, 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 down. I never heard it hit anything. It just disappeared. And when it extinguished, I was in this inky blackness that I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, and sort of had this vertigo feeling, like I realized I'm standing on the edge of this bottomless pit, and I wanted something to grab onto. So I lit another match and gingerly turned around, made my way out. Eventually, we got out into the daylight. But as I think back on that, it reminds me of the state of humanity. Quite literally, standing on the edge of the abyss, ready to tumble into an eternity without God. It's why we must preach the gospel of Jesus Christ so that the glorious truth can dawn upon them and bring them out into the light of God's kingdom. You were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Jesus said this in John 12:46, "I have come as a light into the world, that whoever believes in me should not abide in darkness." And that darkness, it's a type of man's lost state without God, but it's actually more than that. In the New Testament, when the Scriptures refer to darkness, it not only refers to this separation from God, it's also a type of the devil's dominion. You would know this verse from Ephesians 6 where it talks about the battle that we fight, that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but literally our battle is spiritual. And that the designations that Paul gives to different classes of evil spirits, principalities, powers. And then he says this, speaking of evil spirits, they are the rulers of the darkness of this world. That is their dominion, the rulers of the darkness of this world. The Bible says in 1 John 5:19, "We know that we are of God, and the whole world lies under the sway of the wicked one. And the world doesn't know it. Not just separated from God, but according to the Scriptures, under the influence, the sway, the dominion of the wicked one. But here's the good news. Colossians 1:13, listen to it. The Father has delivered and drawn us to Himself out of the control and the dominion of darkness, and has transferred us into the kingdom of the Son of His love. For those that have embraced Christ, we've been transferred out, taken out from under the control of the evil one, my friend. Out from under the control of darkness. I've been transferred out. I am no longer under the devil's jurisdiction. I'm not under the authority of darkness. I've been transferred. I've been brought out from under his control, and the devil has no more authority over the child of God than Pharaoh did over Israel after Pharaoh's armies were drowned in the Red Sea. We've been brought out. In fact, the news gets better. As believers, we are now the ones with authority. Jesus said this to his disciples, Luke 10:19, Behold, I give you the authority to trample serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. I give you the authority over all the power of the enemy. When I was an assistant pastor in the Inland Empire, we had a couple came up to me after service one day and asked me to pray. It was about their child, and I honestly don't remember if it was a boy or a girl, but it was about a 6-year-old child. And they began to explain, said, every night for the longest time, we put our child to bed, and they go to sleep fine, but they wake up in the middle of the night screaming, absolutely terrified, and they're inconsolable. We have to hold them, and they just sob. They're in a panic, and there's nothing we've been able to do about it. And they're explaining this, and they said, every night, it's tearing our family apart. We don't know what to do. And while they're telling me this story, I felt like the Holy Spirit whispered to my heart, that's a spirit of fear, and you need to deal with it. I said, let's pray. We took hands, and there was another guy standing there, took hands with us as well, and prayed a pretty simple prayer. And in it, I said something like, you spirit of fear that's tormenting this child, I command you to stop, leave that house in Jesus' name. That was pretty much it. And, they said thanks, went their way. And when they left, the other guy that prayed for us says, Bayless, when you started to pray, I had a vision. I said, really? He said, I did. I said, well, what'd you see? He said, well, when you started to pray, suddenly I was in that child's bedroom, and the covers were all like messed up, sort of crumpled up on the bed. And when you addressed that spirit of fear, when you said spirit of fear, this horrible little dark thing sat up in the bed and looked straight at where your voice was coming from. And said, when you said the name of Jesus, it was like this ball of light came through the bedroom window and hit that thing, and boom, it was gone. I said, well, pretty cool vision. But, the proof of the pudding's in the eating. We'll see. Anyway, that family came back the next week and said, you know what? Something's happened. Every night our child has slept through the night. That's never woken up terrified anymore. It's over. And they were never visited with that again. Not only are we not under the control and authority of darkness, we have authority over the darkness. They were children of God, part of God's family. What about those outside of God's family? Well, I think we certainly understand that the devil doesn't want them to understand and believe the gospel. In fact, this is what the Scripture says. Paul wrote this to the church of Corinth, 2 Corinthians 4, verses 3 and 4. Listen to it. He said, if the good news we preach is hidden behind a veil, it is hidden only from people who are perishing. Satan, who is the god of this world, has blinded the minds of those who don't believe. They are unable to see the glorious light of the good news. They don't understand this message about the glory of Christ, who is the exact likeness of God. He said, those that are perishing, Satan has blinded their minds. And because of that, he said they're unable to see. They don't understand. The truth of the gospel is hidden to them because of this blindness the devil has put on their minds. Now, I happen to believe that through prayer and as we exercise the authority we've been given, that darkness and that spiritual blindness can be broken off of people's minds so that they can see the glorious light of the gospel. I mean, consider this. Paul's writing again to the Corinthians, a group of people that he was sent to by God, commissioned to go and bring the good news to them. And this is what he said. 2 Corinthians 10 and 13, he said, but we will not boast of authority we do not have. Our goal is to stay within the boundaries of God's plan for us. And this plan includes our working there with you. And he said, we don't have authority everywhere, and we don't have authority in everyone's life. We stay within the bounds of God's plan, but we do have a degree of authority with you because we've been sent to you. We all have our part and our sphere of authority and influence. But you know, even once that darkness is broken off of a person's mind, the choice is still theirs. God doesn't violate people's will. When I got saved, I immediately shared the gospel with all of my friends. Most of them thought I was crazy. In fact, they thought, okay, this is a phase. We've seen Bayless, yeah, you're into this for a while, you're into that. How long is this going to last? Well, it's been well over 40 years. I don't think it's going away. But two friends in particular that I was very, very close with, and I shared with both of them, and it was like, they couldn't see it. It's like, come on, you know, and they'd roll their eyes at me and like, please. And I just began to earnestly pray, just like we've been talking about, that blindness would be broken off of their minds. That they'd be able to see this wonderful Jesus and the truth of the gospel. I mean, I prayed earnestly and daily for these guys. And I invited them both to attend certain things with me. One I invited to a Christian event. It was a concert. The other one to church. Well, the guy I invited to the concert, he said, I'm not coming. You got to be crazy. There's no way. So I go to the concert, and it was this Christian band, and there's maybe 100 people there. It was pretty good. And at the end, the leader of the band shares the gospel, gives an invitation. Nobody budges. And then I hear somebody softly crying. And I turn around, and it's my friend. Apparently, he came in the back and stood back there, heard the gospel, and he comes up to the front, he's bowed over, and he's broken. He's weeping. He comes to the front, gets saved. I had the privilege a few days later to lay hands on him and see him filled with the Holy Spirit. My other friend, he agreed to accept the invitation, came with me to church. We're sitting on like the second row. And if you've experienced this, you'll understand what I'm saying. If you don't, I pray that you do experience it. But we're just in normal service. It's good flow of things. And suddenly, God stepped down into the auditorium. I don't know how else to describe it. Suddenly, there was a tangible, undeniable presence of God, and everyone in the building knew it. And I began to sob. And my friend saw it as well, and he felt it. And he looked at me, and with his look of terror on his face, he literally plowed over me, plowed over the woman next to him, and ran down the center aisle out the back of the church. Both of them, the darkness was broken off in their minds. One of them came to the front humbly. The other one ran to the back. God does leave the choice to us, but at least people can have the opportunity to see. This choice is still theirs. And honestly, I've lost touch with both of them, but to this day, I pray for them more than 40 years. And I pray for them both regularly. The one that accepted Christ, I pray that he be conformed into the image of Jesus. That if he's married, has a family, that his family comes to know Christ, that he fulfill the will of God. The other guy, I still pray for his salvation. I know he got married and he had a daughter. I pray for his wife, pray for his daughter. And I reckon I'll pray for them until I go home to be with Jesus or until Jesus returns. But I guess the question I want to ask you and that we need to consider is who might or who should you be praying for? That darkness would be lifted from their mind, that they might see, that they might understand. As you may not have authority everywhere and with everyone, but you do have authority. There are some people that God has sent you to, and He wants you to pray. So they'll have the opportunity to see without that spiritual blindness over them. And we have a part to play in that. Now, if you have your Bible, you can look at John chapter 6. There's a second I am statement that Jesus made that we're going to cover here. John chapter 6 and verse 35 says this, and Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. And then drop down to verse 51, he said, I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I shall give is my flesh, which I shall give for the life of the world. Now think about that. I am the bread of life. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. And the bread that I give is my flesh. You see, bread comes from grain. In another place in John's Gospel, in chapter 12, Jesus went on to liken His life to a grain or to a kernel of wheat. And before it becomes bread, that kernel of wheat must be bruised, broken, and crushed. And the Scripture says of Jesus that He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities, that He was oppressed. He was afflicted. Literally, the weight of the sin's world crushed Him. Why did this kernel of wheat that came down from heaven, why did it have to be crushed and bruised and broken? Because the world was in the throes of a spiritual famine. Men and women were dying in need of bread, in need of life. And the suffering Savior, our precious Lord Jesus, that had been beaten, scourged, and nailed to Calvary's tree, became the bread of life for all of humanity. And from that one kernel came enough bread to feed all nations, peoples, tribes, and tongues, that they would have eternal life. Jesus said, I am the bread of life. Now, He also said something in connection with that we need to consider. He said, I'm the bread of life, and the one that comes to me, the one that believes in me, will never hunger and will never thirst. In other words, Jesus is saying, I satisfy. You come to me, you won't have to go anywhere else. You won't have to try and fill that empty place with another drug, with another boyfriend, with another girlfriend, with money, with things, with religion, with adventure. Jesus is enough. Jesus satisfies. And I know there are people that'll say, well, look, I believe in Jesus, I'm still not satisfied. What I'd say to you is you need to sell out. Jesus also said that it's not until you're willing to lose your life for His sake that you can find it. This isn't about dipping your toe in and seeing, how the waters are. This isn't about taking Christianity for a test drive. This only works. It only works when you go all in. And if you're willing to do that, give your all for the one that was bruised, broken, and crushed so that you might have life, my friend, you will know that He's enough. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad that you joined me today, and I want to share something with you. It's pretty simple, but I do believe it with all my heart. It is not a coincidence that you're watching and listening to me right now, or maybe just listening. Maybe you hear my voice from the other room. There's a reason for it. God wants you to go all in. As we go into this new year, let's make it a year of all in for Jesus. As I said in the message, this thing only works when we're all in. Let me pray with you. Father, I just pray with my friend right now, that the one that's considered Christianity, the one that's considered the claims of Christ, may they know in their heart that you're speaking to them right now. And I pray that as they look upward in their heart, that they would find the Savior beautiful and raised from the dead, sitting on the throne and coming back soon. My friend, Jesus loves you. You'll never regret giving him your all. And I also want to thank those that join us in partnership. You know, this message that you heard has actually gone around the world in multiple languages, in more than 100 countries, in 11 different languages. People are being reached with the gospel of Jesus Christ because people faithfully give. They believe in what we're doing. So thank you to our partners. Bless you.
Heeft de preek je aan het denken gezet? Dan hebben we voor jou een gratis aanbod op onze website over het onderwerp Ervaar de kracht van God. God wil je dragen als je zwak bent. Hij heeft de kracht en wil je deze kracht elke dag opnieuw geven. Maar hoe kunnen we deze kracht dan ontvangen? Baylis Conley heeft een boekje over dit onderwerp geschreven. Ontdek Gods kracht voor jou. Download het boekje gratis op baylis-conley.nl/kracht en laat God je op zijn schouders tillen.
Wil je de uitzendingen van Baylis kunnen bekijken als je onderweg bent? In onze mediatheek hebben we meer dan 300 preken voor je klaarstaan. Antwoorden voor elke dag. Ga naar baylis-conley.nl/mediatheek. Heb je vragen over de uitzending? Of houd je iets bezig waarvoor we kunnen bidden? Schrijf ons dan of bel ons op. Ons team is er voor je. Hier vind je nog meer antwoorden op levensvragen. Er is elke dag een nieuwe overdenking van Baylis, die je online kunt lezen of die je per e-mail kunt ontvangen. Als je op de hoogte wilt blijven van de preken, kun je je abonneren op ons kanaal. God zegen.